My name's Zerkovich, and Creative Assembly have enlisted my help with this video to guide you to glory in Total War Warhammer 2. So, what is it that sets all different units apart from each other? Well, it's a combination of things, and the unit information panel will tell us everything we need to know. From how many combatants there are in the unit, how many hit points the unit has, all of their different stats, and any abilities will govern how the unit performs in battle. Getting to know and understand all these things is the key to becoming proficient in Total War. So let's go through them. Unit size and hit points are both fairly self-explanatory. The bigger these are, the more punishment a unit can take. Units can have self-regeneration or regeneration cast on them. Armor will determine how much damage a unit can resist. The higher the armor, the tougher a unit generally is, making them harder to get rid of. Leadership is a measure of the unit's psychological strength. As a battle wears on, a unit will take many penalties to its leadership. When its leadership gets too low, they'll lose the will to fight and begin to retreat. Speed is simply how fast a unit moves. Heavily armoured units tend to move slower than lightly armoured ones. On to melee attack, which is one of your more important stats to pay attention to. Melee attack determines a unit's chance of hitting the enemy, so basically, the higher the melee attack, the more damage a unit will do, making some better damage dealers and better at overcoming higher melee defense. Melee defense is your unit's chance to dodge and avoid damage. A unit with high melee defense will be able to hold out and fight for a long time. A unit with low melee defense will take damage very quickly. Another important stat to pay attention to, as is weapon strength, which is a measure of how much damage a unit's weapon can do, which is split into base weapon damage and armor piercing damage. This stat can basically tell you what kind of unit they're best at fighting, but we'll go into this more in a moment. Charge bonus is how much extra damage your unit can do when they charge into an enemy one. This applies on initial contact, but has no effect when units are stationary and fighting. Units with a high charge bonus like shock cavalry could be charged in and pulled away repeatedly to make the most use of that high charge bonus. So, get to know and understand these stats to best wield your troops in battle. Now let's talk more about the importance of armor piercing. An armor piercing unit is indicated by the symbol next to their weapon strength. If you scroll over weapon strength, it'll tell you how much armor piercing and base damage they have. A unit that has high armor piercing damage is best off fighting heavily armoured units. This is because no matter how high a unit's armor is, they will feel the full force of that armor piercing damage, whereas base weapon damage may not be able to penetrate the armor. A unit with high base damage but low armor piercing may struggle against a heavily armoured unit because a lot of their damage won't be able to get through the armor. Now I can appreciate this all sounds very confusing, so if you're lost, simply follow this rule. Units with high armor piercing damage, indicated by the symbol next to their weapon strength, ideally want to be fighting heavily armoured units to make the most of their weapon damage. A unit without this symbol next to their weapon strength is going to be best off fighting lightly armoured troops. So pay attention to who has the armor piercing symbol and your enemy's armor. Now let's make sure we understand another important symbol, bonus versus large. This is what makes anti-large units great against large foes. And as I mentioned, spearmen are the most common form of anti-large unit, but there are many different types of units that can harbour this ability as well. It's simply extra damage output that is only applied to large foes. Anything smaller than cavalry doesn't have to worry about the bonus versus large. So be sure to get your anti-large units after large foes, and be sure to keep your cavalry and monsters away from anything with a bonus versus large at the same time. And there are many different symbols that you'll come across when browsing unit information. Simply scroll over them to find out what they do, and think of how you could apply that against an enemy. You can also browse through a unit's abilities at the bottom of the info panel. One of the most common abilities you'll come across, Fear, is a very dangerous tool. It'll provide a constant penalty to any nearby unit's leadership, meaning they may rout and run away that little bit sooner, especially if they have low leadership anyway. Some units can be immune to this kind of psychology, and any unit that causes fear won't be affected by it, which is also true of the Terror ability, which works slightly differently than Fear. When a terror-causing unit comes into contact with the enemy, it has a chance to instantly rout them on the spot, provided that the enemy's leadership is low enough. If it's not, then terror will have no effect. So be sure to browse all the different abilities of all the different units. It all comes down to getting to know your units and understanding their role within your army. This all may sound very daunting as there is a lot to learn, but honestly, the more you play the game, the more you'll start to understand and work things out as you go along. You won't need to memorise all the stats of every unit in the game, you'll simply pick up on the strengths and weaknesses of each kind of unit. So stick with it, as Total War is a game of gathering knowledge. So with the power of prediction, we'll need to work to ensure the best matchups possible for our units. This is done by countering whatever the enemy throws at us. If they send some Cold One Spear Riders our way, we need to decide which of our units is going to be the best for taking them down. I've got a few units that aren't occupied, so which one should I send to engage them? I could send my melee infantry Storm Vermin, who are a pretty tough unit, can do a good amount of damage. However, they lack any kind of anti-large bonus and will feel the full force of a cavalry charge to their tiny rat faces. I could send my Rat Ogres, who are a very strong, dangerous unit capable of lots of damage, but the Cold One Spear Riders are anti-large, so they'll deal a hell of a lot of extra damage to my Rat Ogres, so I'm not going to send them because it'll be unnecessary damage. I also have Storm Vermin with Halberds available, and these are of course without a doubt the best unit to take on cavalry. They have that bonus versus large, and they also have a trait called Charge Defense against large foes. This means that when they're stood still, they won't take any damage from the enemy's charge bonus, further increasing their survivability against large enemies. They're also armor piercing, which is great because the Cold One Spear Riders are heavily armored, so I'll send them off to engage the cavalry. But remember, both sides are trying to do this to get the best matchups to ensure victory for their units, so you'll have to work to gain these advantages all across the battlefield.